So you can kind of take all of this data and put it together. And that was actually one of my first tasks, which was pretty amazing, to have access to data that said, like, how many guests go to an attraction per day? What is the guest rating of that attraction per day? And then also kind of take in that kind of technical data, which is like, hey, there's this one sensor. Every time this ride vehicle does this one thing, it always bumps that sensor and it causes the downtime. And kind of aggregate all of that into a model, basically, that says, hey, for every minute of downtime on this one attraction impacts the guest experience so much more than even 10 minutes of downtime in this other attraction. And so why don't we get really, really smart and say that 1 minute over here has so much more of an impact on the guest experience that we want to, make sure that it's the best possible experience. How do we focus our efforts to make sure that we can minimize that?
Every year, millions of attraction visitors lose hours in line instead of making memories.
Since its inception, Accesso's virtual queuing has saved more than 4.5 billion, yes, that is billion with a B, minutes of wait time, freeing guests to pack their day with more rides, eats, and excitement.
The result? Happier guests who spend more and a better bottom line for you.
Ready to turn waits into wins? Visit accesso.com/ROI clinic.
The queues are virtual. The results are real.
Welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast, where we discuss the latest trends and challenges facing the attractions industry today.
We chat with some of the top leaders in the field and provide resources that will help develop your career in this great industry.
I am Josh Liebman. I am obsessed with the guest experience and helping attractions make that their top priority for success.
And I'm Matt Heller. I am passionate about organizational effectiveness, leadership development, and employee engagement.
Now sit upright, hold on tight, and get ready for the Attraction Pros podcast. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Today, Josh, well, it's not only today, but I am fantastic.
All right. Yes, we have a lot of proof to show that it is not only today. Question for you.
Yes.
Your first job in the industry, if I know you well enough, was at Canopy Lake Park in New Hampshire.
Correct.
And you got a job as a frontline employee?
I did.
And you got that job because you had this burning passion to pursue a career in amusement parks and the attractions industry.
Not at the time.
So why would you get that job?
My mom told me to.
Heard that.
Yeah.
And it was a summer job, right?
It absolutely was a summer job, and not one that I expected to last 30 plus years. But here we are. Yeah.
Here we are. Yeah.
Yeah.
The reason I ask is because that's a familiar story in this business, isn't it?
It is. I think it's your story too.
It is. I wasn't totally sure. I knew that I wanted to be a ride operator. It was at Cedar Point. I knew I wanted to work there. I definitely thought that the next summer I was going to go be a counselor at the summer camp that I grew up going to. And yeah, during the course of that first summer, I was like, nope, I want to do this every summer for the rest of my life, and whether it's here or in this industry.
Yeah.
And then that turned into spring, fall, and winter.
Exactly.
Especially moving to Florida for a while there. So.
Well, and it's like I said, my mom did suggest that I go get that job, but when I got into it and I found out what it was all about, and I did work a couple of summers while I was in college, that's when the bug sort of bit, if you will. And I really started to understand the entertainment part of it. I liked running big machines. I liked the guest experience part of it. Just everything that you get to experience as a ride operator, I just sort of fell in love with. And that's what has fueled me, for all these years.
And then really being able to see kind of the inner workings of the machine, of the large machines that
Exactly.
you're operating, and being able to see that. So the reason I asked is our guest today is Michael Acevedo. He is the business development manager for Nassal, based in Orlando, Florida. And that's how his career story started. He grew up in Central Florida, got a job as a ride operator, and then now here we are, nearly a quarter century later. He's worked on some of the most ambitious projects that our industry has seen, and I don't think that I think that's a fair statement to make that of the projects that he's worked on.
Absolutely, absolutely. So he gets to talk about that. One of the really cool sort of peel back the onion topics that he gets to talk about, because we asked him, was about reliability and guest experience. So the relationship between basically how much uptime a ride has and the guest experience. But he really goes in depth into the resources that are necessary for that, the data that people collect, the analyzation that goes into that data to figure out where they're going to put their priorities, where they're going to put their resources. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, and almost, for me, I was kind of thinking of my time in that space, not only in attractions, but also in the guest services side of it. And I think if we do the math, that all three of us were at Universal at the same time, and that included the opening of the Wizarding World of Harry Potter. So you were doing leadership development and coaching and training in the HR department. He was working on reliability and uptime from the creative side, from the engineering and tech services side. And I was managing all the guest complaints about lines and crowds and ride reliability and working with those. So I think I probably helped feed him some data that helped align some of the priorities to do that, and then helped your leaders lead their team members towards continual success. So that's a cool Venn diagram full circle moment, which we'll talk about full circle in a second. But we asked him about career advice as well. And the biggest thing he talked about, and we won't steal a thunder from him here in the intro, but just the importance of being yourself. And, I think that the theme of authenticity is one that we've heard a lot on the podcast, is one that definitely, it doesn't get old. I think it's just a continual reminder of, we need people who are simply themselves and not trying to be someone else, and showing up every single day as the person who you are as an individual helps not only you, but helps the organization. And, he talks about times where he was promoted or given a new opportunity, or the times where he was not trying to be something else, but simply being authentic to who he is.
Absolutely. And I love the way he weaves in the fact that, every profession is needed in this industry. Whether you're an entertainer or you're an accountant or you're a mechanic or you're a ride operator, right? Everybody is needed. And the last thing he kind of talked about is, you teased there just a minute ago, with these full circle career moments, and how he reflects back on things that he did 20 years ago. And now, those dreams are coming true now, just because he's been himself. It's been through a lot of hard work. So he kind of talks about those full circle career moments in that journey. And if I may, just for a moment, I had one of those at NIAPA, or at IAPA, because I went to the NIAPA dinner, the Tom Morrow dinner, and there I got to see Carl Burney, who is the person that actually hired me as a ride operator many years ago. But also I got to interact with Ryan DiMaria, who's somebody that I hired at Canopy, and it was like 20 something years ago, maybe almost 30. And he is their operations manager now at the park. So that was a really cool moment to, be in the room with the person that hired me and really started my career, and then somebody who I hired for a summer job, and it turned into a career for him as well. So that was just such a cool moment. And I'm glad that Michael brought it up because it's something I think a lot of us can reflect on.
That's awesome. Yeah, especially the more time that we're in the industry, the more that we have the opportunity to reflect and think about how far we come. And that can be a challenge on a day-to-day basis when we're very much caught in the minutia, which is something that also goes into seeing attractions come to life. So I think we could do a whole podcast interview, or a whole podcast, just the two of us talking about this interview with Michael, but that wouldn't be good for us, and that wouldn't be good for our audience. So what do you say? Should we get to this interview with Michael Acevedo?
Let's do it. Hey, Michael, welcome to the Attraction Pros podcast. How you doing today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So excited for this conversation. We all have universal experience, which is so cool. That'll probably come up at some point, but would love to hear a little bit about kind of your background and your career to this point.
Yeah, well, I was really lucky. I kind of grew up in Orlando, so the theme park industry and themed entertainment as a whole kind of grew up around me, which really inspired me to want to, pursue this career. I remember being a kid watching Animal Kingdom open up, the grand opening of that, Islands of Adventures. So really, just kind of seeing that and being captivated by wanting to be a part of that in some kind of way. I really started in the industry in what was supposed to be, I think, a summer job at Universal and attractions. Back in 2003 is really when I got started. Working at Seuss Landing was my very first attractions gig. And again, it was supposed to be a summer job. Really what I wanted to do was, get access to the parks because I just love them so much. But that really led into what it turned out to be a 10-year career at Universal, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit more. But so I had a lot of great opportunities. I joined the Revenge of the Mummy team to help open that attraction in 2004, which was super exciting. And from there, I remember, watching the folks from Universal Creative kind of like stand by and see guests coming off of the ride for the first time and just being like, oh my God, that would just be so cool to have delivered something like this, and seeing people just enjoy like all those things that I worked on for so long. So I really was really like the catalyst for like, I got to find some way to really, I want to do that. Whatever they're doing, I need to find a way to do that. So I really leveraged the opportunity of working at Universal and having access to folks at Universal Creative. And so my first kind of in was at Tech Services Engineering. So I was able to do an engineering internship there and kind of really see a little bit more of like the maintenance side of things and really what it took to kind of operate these attractions at like a deeper level, what reliability meant and like how did that impact the guest experience. Then I was able to take that in, and I had the really amazing fortune of working under Chris Oliver from Universal Creative on Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey. That was kind of like my first projects appointment. As like a intern kind of project coordinator on the ride side of things. Literally, you can imagine an intern carrying like, I think it was something like 50 different binders of like testing and all this kind of stuff that we had to do for getting that ride ready. That was really when I got into it, kind of like over my eyeballs and like, holy cow, like this is way more than I thought it was going to be. It was super fun, by the way, but it was just, coming in at 2 a.m. to do some ride testing didn't really seem like, I didn't really know that's what it was going to be, but that was awesome. Got to work on the Transformers attraction as well at Universal with Universal Creative, same thing on the ride side. Then I transitioned over to Imagineering at Disney, where I kind of got my break there as a technical writer of all things on the Fantasyland expansion, which is when, Seven Dwarfs Mine Train came out, The Little Mermaid, that whole area in the back of the park. And then from there, had the great fortune of joining Imagineering more directly in the show design and production team, working on Disney Springs, eventually Star Wars, Rise of the Resistance, did that for several years. And then Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser was the last thing that I got to be a part of before I ended up leaving Imagineering to go do other things out in the industry. So I've been now at Nassal for about 4 years, the first 3 years of which I was a senior project manager helping on Harry Potter Ministry of Magic over at Epic Universe, doing our small but amazing portion to help bring that attraction to life and that land to life. And then now I lead our business development at Nassal for the last year. As of IAPA this year made a year for me. So it was an exciting time and just it's been a pretty wild ride, but I'm excited about, where my career has been and where it's going. And now in this role, kind of have the opportunity to really like give back to our industry in a much more meaningful way.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And so much to unpack here. I'm just thinking about just your career journey. The first thing you said as well was supposed to be a summer job. And Matt, you and I have heard that a lot of, well, all right, I'm going to go get my summer job and then I'll go on and do my real job when I grow up. Right. And now it's like, well, all right, all these years later, almost 23 years later, basically almost, here we are, 22 plus. And I also thinking too of just having worked on Harry Potter and the Forbidden Journey within Universal Creative and then Harry Potter and the Ministry of Magic with Nassal had to have been a really cool full circle moment. So we'll probably have the opportunity to talk about that. But I do want to talk about your time in attractions with Seuss Landing and then getting to open Revenge of the Mummy and then that jump into tech services and engineering. You talked about how they were seeing the guests coming off the ride and being able to react to that and respond to that. And I'm curious as far as what kind of caused or inspired that transition from you to say, all right, attractions operations is great, but I really want to dip my toe in this over here and explore this other side of the business, which is very similar in some ways, but also very different in many other ways.
Yeah, you know what? I think as a kid, I grew up watching the Disney Channel, and Imagineer, that was like this segment that existed, and I was always inspired by what it meant to be a creator in some kind of way. I just honestly, when I was younger, I had no idea what that meant or how do you go about that, which is part of why I really focus so much of my energy now as a professional to kind of like help people find that path themselves. And we can talk about that a little bit more specifically later. But I studied engineering initially when I first went to college, thinking that was the path. Like, I grew up playing Roller Coaster Tycoon, and I was like, I'm going to be a roller coaster designer, whatever that meant. I had no idea. But I assumed it meant you had to be an engineer. So I went to school for mechanical engineering. And through that process is what gave me the opportunity to work at tech services engineering. Universal was just so good to me about, and in general, like for anyone who's trying to find their path in their career, like they had really, even at that time, I'm not sure how it is now, but at that time they had the really like robust programs where like, hey, you want to find a path to like become an accountant here? Like we'll pair you up with an accountant and tell you what that even means, So I was able to really take advantage of that through, team member services and all that, and got paired up with Paula Stenzler. Actually, she was the director of engineering at the time, and she was like a huge advocate for me because she saw my passion, and I was like, this young kid who really didn't know what he wanted to do, but I was like, hey, just throw me in there. I'll figure it out along the way. And she helped really kind of give me that first opportunity and then kind of learn more about like what it really meant to be a part of this industry. When you're in operations, you kind of see this big, beautiful world, but it's very vague and there's like a lot of secrecy, it feels like. And, for rightful reasons, you learn more about that later, but, finding the mentors who are able to kind of say, hey, I see your passion. I see here's some kind of like core skills that you have that we can apply to something. Let's put you in a place where you can kind of use those skills and then use that also as an opportunity to learn. That was super invaluable. So I guess that jump from operations to engineering was a little bit of luck, but a little bit kind of like a fate at the same time. And definitely, attribute a lot of that to the willingness of like mentors and even being a part of an organization with leaders that are like, heck yeah, like if there's someone who already works here that wants to give more of an impact or deliver more value to our organization, like why would we not want to bring them up, So I definitely am grateful for that and, took full advantage of that opportunity and helped to try to do that to our industry today, my part of that anyway.
Yeah, Michael, I actually remember pretty vividly my orientation at Universal back in 2003. And they said, like, if you don't like what you're doing now, but you like kind of the company, like we'll find a spot for you. And I always love that about the organization and that kind of openness to find the right role for everybody. But I'm curious if we can go back a little bit to something you said earlier that really kind of pinged in my brain, because you talked about the relationship between reliability and guest experience. And certainly we've all gone up to attraction and, it's closed. We've all done that, right? But can you talk to us a little bit about what it's like behind the scenes, like from the tech services standpoint, what they're going through maybe during those downtimes, or, what it takes to keep a ride up and reliable?
Yeah, I think what people will maybe take for granted, and that's part of like the magic of why we go to these things, is really how many resources it takes to keep these really ambitious, technology focused like machines that just tell stories, really what it takes to really do that. And being a part of tech services and an engineering department specifically, I was able to kind of see that passion and kind of like the kind of the commitment that everyone had. Like, they not only were they personally passionate about making sure that they were helping to do their part to, keep the reliability as as high as possible, but they're also accountable for it too. So like, that kind of that organization and setting up that kind of expectation to make reliability be the focus of all was really cool to see. And I think what was even more so impressive, and I was kind of blown away by this, that I was actually given the opportunity to kind of have access to a little bit of data that, wasn't necessarily tech services data, wasn't necessarily reliability data, but it was a way to kind of say, hey, there's correlation here between like the uptime of an attraction and how does that impact the guest experience, right? So, there's always all these surveys that guests take around the park and like, how much did you love the Spider-Man attraction? Or like, which attractions were you able to do today versus not be able to do? And what did that impact? How did that impact your satisfaction as a guest? So you can kind of take all of this data and put it together. And that was actually one of my first tasks, which was pretty amazing, to have access to data that said like, how many guests go to an attraction per day? What is the guest rating of that attraction per day? And then also kind of take in that kind of technical data, which is like, hey, there's this one sensor. Every time this ride vehicle does this one thing, it always bumps that sensor and it causes the downtime. And kind of aggregate all of that into a model, basically, that says, hey, for every minute of downtime on this one attraction impacts the guest experience so much more than even 10 minutes of downtime in this other attraction. And so why don't we get really, really smart and say that 1 minute over here has so much more of an impact on the guest experience that we want to, make sure that it's the best possible experience. How do we focus our efforts to make sure that we can minimize that? So getting a sneak peek into kind of like that interworkings and that level of thinking, like really, first of all, I felt like super humbled to be a part of kind of like an operation like that. But then seeing how that actually was put into action and it kind of transformed even the way that Universal did business, like focusing on quality, and then seeing how that kind of shaped our industry as a whole, where you're not just saying, hey, it's, sure, having an attraction open as long as possible is like really important. Yeah, it is. But when you have so many attractions, like how do you even prioritize like focusing on the guest experience specifically? How to bring those resources into a way that leads to the most impact, right?
That's so interesting. I don't think I've ever, I get that conceptually, but I don't think I've ever really looked at it, very much from that standpoint on how granular that data is, and very much requiring interdepartmental communication or transparency of that data, of saying, okay, our efforts are being driven by things that are mission critical to the business, rather than, all right, we're going to stay in our lane and we're just manage uptime. Well, okay, well, what does that actually mean? So I really appreciate you just giving additional context to that. I find that so fascinating. So wondering if we can, it's not really switching gears here, but would love to talk about just your role specifically with Nassal, or even kind of backing up of just people who might not be familiar. Tell us about Nassal. Tell us about the company.
Yeah, Nassal is really cool because it's been in business for over 40 years. We actually started off as a general contractor, which just means like general construction, like building buildings, things like that. One of the first projects that Nassal worked on in themed entertainment was actually the Psycho House at Universal way back in the day, like when Universal first came to Orlando. Because we were a contractor, we could build houses. That was just a house that just so happened to be famous because it was in a movie. And then kind of as that team that helped deliver Universal, which is primarily from California, kind of all went away after the park opened up, we really saw a need to kind of service that industry as it continued to grow. So as builders, we were able to lean into themed entertainment. And from there, we really grew into servicing all the different markets, right? As themed entertainment really grew, we were able to kind of like lean into like zoos and aquariums and casinos and museums and all of these other industries that kind of like really started to realize how important storytelling and the guest experience and like how much the environment really, like the environment that you put guests into, really impact like that experience overall. So we kind of found like a niche to be custom fabricators and theming contractors in that space. And we've been super fortunate to work with, Disney, Universal, and all of these other brands. Everything from Georgia Aquarium to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to the Kennedy Space Center, like all sorts of things. You can really just imagine anything that has like a really cool thing that's just kind of, you can't buy it out of a catalog. For instance, a Harry Potter castle, like where do you get that from? You got to call people like us. So we've been pretty fortunate to be a part of all of that throughout the 40-year history. And we are actually kind of two brands, if you will. So we have Nassal as kind of how I described it, which is kind of custom fabrication and theming. But then we have another brand called nFusion, and nFusion focuses more on like that turnkey design build kind of factor. So generally the way that I describe it is when a client comes to us and says, hey, we have this thing, we know what it wants to be, just we really need to understand how to build it. Like that's what Nassal does. We focus on literally the nuts and bolts, materiality, asking all the right questions to help inform that design and deliver it on it. That's what we do at Nassal. When a client comes to us and say, hey, we have this kind of idea, it's a little bit squishy, or maybe it integrates with a whole bunch of technology and all these other things that we don't really specialize at Nassal in-house, we can give it to our team at nFusion, who really kind of help bring that white glove kind of approach to leading clients down a path of, making sure that a project is feasible, deliverable, operable, all those sorts of things. And then the cool thing about that is that then, potentially there's clients that our nFusion team can help kind of define some scopes that are built, that needs to be built. And then maybe Nassal could come in as a solution to help actually build those things, or not. It's just whatever makes the most sense for the client, based on the budget, scope, and schedule and all that. So that's kind of like a bit about Nassal. We've worked all around the world, but we're based here in Orlando, Florida. We're about to move into a brand new facility, 150,000 square feet in Orlando as well. So we're really like doubling down on our presence in Orlando. And it's just an exciting time as we kind of move into this new space. It's going to be all new equipment and expanded capabilities. So I feel like the Nassal that everyone knows for the last 40 years, which has delivered some pretty amazing things, like the next chapter is coming. And I'm just so excited to be a part of that.
That's so awesome. You mentioned obviously some of the projects, but also kind of the process, right? If it's not you, it might be nFusion and working with your clients. Can you talk a little bit about that collaboration process? Because there's the owner of the process, there's you as the contractor, there's a designer. I mean, there's a lot of people involved. So can you talk a little bit about that collaboration process?
Yeah, something that I've been fortunate to experience is kind of both sides of the table, if you will, kind of like being the owner, working at Universal or at Disney, for instance, and then being the contractor, so this side of the table. Inherently in projects, there's a lot of kind of like gatekeeping, if you will, because every kind of stakeholder at the table kind of has like their most important thing. Like for merchandise, their most important thing is this. For food and beverage, their most important thing is this. For the maintenance team, it's kind of these conflicting kind of priorities, but if you kind of put that all in like this Venn diagram, if you will, there is kind of like that little sweet spot in the center there. And like, I feel like, my part of that, as having worked on the owner side and also here as a contractor, is kind of like helping to kind of like sift through all of that and kind of find like, what is that sweet spot in the middle that kind of like helps address most, everyone can't have everything, right? But we can try to find the thing that kind of adds the most value. And that's really like what we focus on, right? Is like trying to find the ways to deliver the most of that guest experience as possible, whether that comes through engaging as early as possible, meaning, hey, you're still kind of designing a thing, but like, why not bring in someone who knows how to build stuff and say, are we even designing something that's buildable? Or like, hey, sure, it's buildable, but is it even in alignment with the amount of budget that we have or the time frame that we have to do it? So my role, especially when I was, leading, as a project manager, coming in and kind of being an advocate for, I guess really it's like drawing back from that experience as in operations. Like I literally know what it's like to sit in front of a guest and say, I'm so sorry, attraction's not open, or, kind of like the impact that operability has on the guest experience, and then kind of being able to bring that into like the design and the production strategy and the delivery model for when we're creating experiences. So really being an advocate for collaboration, because every company is different, in terms of like when they allow contractors to come in and really speak to kind of what they're doing, rightfully so. People try to kind of control what goes out into the public as far as, building the hype over the product, or when's the right time for whatever reason. Maybe it's synchronizing with like movie releases or who knows. But we can all be advocates for making sure that we have the right people at the table to make sure that we're being, good stewards of that money that the company set aside to say, hey, we're going to invest into building this experience. How do we as suppliers, as manufacturers, as designers, help make sure that the most of that investment gets out in front of the guest experience as possible. That's something that I really focus on, is like, how do we find value in the beginning and along the way? Because inevitably there's always this bucket of stuff that's like, man, if we could just find a couple of dollars along the way, we'll be able to throw this extra experience in. But right now it doesn't fit into the program. So if we, even as a builder, can say, hey, here's ways that we can kind of save money along the way, that generally comes back into scope now. And then potentially that, as someone who works in the business, like, now that's scope that potentially we could build also. So that even comes back to us. So ultimately, if we're finding ways to service the guest experience the best possible way, I feel like we all win. The owners win, the operators, the designers win, the guest wins, we win. Like, we can all win if we can work together and collaborate successfully.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for giving some insight into that. I would love to expand on specifically your lens of the project based on your background that you've had in your career, or even starting before that. You said you grew up in Central Florida, so you've been a consumer of the product, basically, it sounds like, your entire life. So you've been visiting as a guest, and then being the ride operator, being, that employee that's standing in the front of the attraction saying, I'm sorry, the attraction's not open right now. And having to manage those guest situations right there, into tech services, into the engineering side of it, into the creative side of it, and the project management side of it. How do all of those past experience maybe come flooding back in the moment within the project that have allowed you to say, okay, if we do this, then X, Y, Z, because I know what that frontline team member, I know where they're going to have to stand. I know that where their line of sight needs to be. I know the path that the guest needs to go to be able to kind of have those conversations within the projects.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's an ever evolving kind of, thing, because we're always learning. And I feel like that's like the most important thing is, I was having, I have conversations about this all the time. It's like, being an authority in your industry is not about being an authoritarian or saying like, this is how we do it, this is what's worked every time, and you must do it this way. Because there are generally kind of like these, kind of these guardrails, if you will. It's like, that's what good leaders do and good project managers. And what I always try to do as a project manager was like kind of set up those guardrails, which said, hey, we need to go down this path, right? There is a scope, schedule, and budget, but you kind of set up some guardrails that allows for some kind of creative flexibility and kind of like learnings along the way. But as long as we kind of stay within this path, like, we're going to lead to a successful delivery of a project, and ultimately lead to business success, because we have to remember that this is a commercial. As cool as it is to build a Star Wars land, like, Disney didn't put in all that money because it was cool. They put it in there because it's a business, it's an investment. Ultimately it's in service of the guest experience, but also, there's shareholders, and it's a business to be run, and we all have to be mindful of that, which is why I kind of tend to always go back to like, what can we do, no matter what side of the table that we're on, to try to help find the most value in delivering these projects. Because again, the best guest experience possible, like, means more money for the owner. It means repeatable attendance. That's like the golden thing, right? It's like, it's great to get somebody to come one time and have an awesome experience, but will they come back? The more they come back, the more that they're going to spend, and the more that means that there's investment opportunities, and the more projects there are, that means our designers, the GCs, the builders like ourselves, like, can be at the table, do more and more things. And I think it really goes back to kind of, delivering that exceptional guest experience, right? Whatever that means, whatever side of the table you're on, whatever part of that process you play, like, keeping that focused in mind. And I kind of touched on it a little bit too, kind of that Venn diagram. Having worked in operations and on the owner side, you get to kind of see it's not necessarily, well, sometimes it is competing kind of priorities, but generally it's like every line of business within these organizations kind of has like what's really important to them. So when they're delivering anything, like, merchandise has goals, food and beverage has goals, like, admissions has goals, VIP tours have everyone has all these goals, and they all want to, get these things. So it's like making sure that everyone has an opportunity to be heard, and kind of like take in all those perspectives. And good leaders can, again, set up those guardrails that says, hey, we're still going to be moving in this direction, but allow some flexibility to say, hey, let's learn from these partners along the way, because truly the success of a project means, different things for different people, but there's ultimately a goal that we have to deliver on. That's that program requirements from the owner. And we just all have to do our part. So, having come in from, you know, as a guest in elementary school, even like our field trips were at Disney or Universal, you know, and knowing that that's a very different experience in the family who's had to save for 10 years to be able to come for that one possible weekend for little Susie's, you know, birthday at the park. Is like, all of those things matter, you know, all of those things matter. And we have to just remember that the why of what we're doing, you know, which is really like that moment, right? It's that moment that family's going to come to escape from the world and all the craziness and go into these magical, happy places. And we have a responsibility to deliver on that, even from when we're designing or thinking about a project to delivering the project to afterwards, maintaining it. Like, how do we make sure that we maintain that experience along the way?
Yeah, yeah. No, I love the way you phrase that in terms of the responsibility that we have, and whether it's somebody coming in for their 100th visit or the only time they're actually going to be there. I think we have that same responsibility. You know, the brands of Disney and Universal have been thrown around a lot in our conversation today, and rightfully so. I mean, they both create an amazing guest experience. They've got some of the most iconic attractions around, but I think it's fair to say that not everybody has the Disney and Universal budget. You know, so I'm curious if I can kind of tap into your, you know, kind of design mind and think about what are things that people should be considering for great attraction design, no matter the scale and no matter the budget, like some of those foundational, you know, things that you go back to and say, no matter what we're going to spend, these are things we have to consider.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because the majority of experiences are not those, right? It's, I mean, 99% of the things are not Disney and Universal, right? So I think we can all agree that what, you know, Disney and Universal and some of these other like top players in our industry really do really well is like, they're incredible storytellers, and they focus heavily on delivering like the most exceptional guest experience possible. And we can kind of see that in our normal lives. Like, if we take off our themed entertainment brains, our hats rather, and, you know, you go to a you know, a good restaurant. It doesn't have to be a 5-star restaurant. It doesn't have to be like the best of whatever. It doesn't have to have all those superlative, like the biggest steak or the fanciest whatever. You know, the superlatives are kind of cool, but like those only last for so long. What stands out the most and what gets you to come back is like that experience, right? It's like, you know, the product has to be good. Like, you're not going to go to a restaurant if it's, again, if the food wasn't good, but it doesn't have to be the best, or it doesn't have to be, you know, A5 Wagyu. It could just be a really great steak, and it has the ambiance and the service was great. And so I'm going to keep coming back there because I felt like, as a consumer, that I got the value of it. So I think, you know, for owners and operators and even designers of experiences for all these other types of, you know, experiences out there, whether it's LBEs or museums or hospitality, all that, you know, it's really focusing on like delivering the best possible experience for the guests. And that comes in many ways. So if you're someone who works in like technology, or, you know, even let's say technology, for instance, making sure that the technology that we put into these experiences like really add value, and they're maintainable, and they're not just this really ambitious thing that as soon as you leave, it's gonna it's gonna degrade, and it's gonna then, you know, that's what's gonna stand out to that guest experience, right? So I think we kind of take some cues off of Disney and Universal, which is like, they're telling great stories and they have a lot of great stories to work with, but really at the end of the day, what it is about that service, right? You don't even have to have a story per se to have a really amazing experience. Some people don't necessarily want to always be immersed in this, you know, a galaxy far away, for instance. You know, they might just want to go ride a roller coaster, and it's like, that's how I was growing up, right? I was just as satisfied with going to Six Flags and riding a really awesome ride. And the reason I would go back is if like the attendants there were like just super welcoming, you know, thanks for coming to ride, you know, Batman the ride or whatever, you know, that would be the reason that I would go back to those things. So I think if we can all kind of stay focused on the fact that what makes a good experience is, what's right for the guest, what's right for the audience, what's right for the budget that you're trying to meet, what's, you know, appropriate for the market that you're in, like making sure that you kind of keep the consumer top of mind. I mean, it's kind of really simple, right? It's like, think about yourself as a consumer. Like, what are the things that you like? If we kind of step away a little bit from like all of these really big ideas and like these kind of the minutia, if you will, of like what we do as professionals in the industry, is like, it goes back to the basics, right? It's like, I just want to go somewhere, feel like I got value for my money and had a really great time. Right.
There you go. Yeah. And I like you make a good point of not everybody wants or needs to be immersed into that extremely detailed themed experience. We can all agree that it's arguably, I think one of the most I think one of the most amazing, coolest things that we have the opportunity to do, especially if it's a fictional story that we're able to be, just absolutely a part of. But for those who are providing a different product that comes off a little bit differently in terms of the way that they're immersing the guest into, and I say in quotes, a story, because it might not be the traditional story that we might necessarily expect, but that focus on the guest experience, providing the value for the product. You said what's best for the audience, what's best for the budget is oftentimes what makes it. So in some cases, it often, I think you took something very complex and really simplified it to say like, okay, is it working really well for the audience that we are serving? Is it providing that value for the experience? So thank you for sharing that. Switching gears just a little bit here. We're recording this in early December, so we are still, I would say, riding the high of IAPA Expo 2025. And within that, Blue Loop announced the top 50 theme park influencers list, and you were on it. So first and foremost, congratulations. And the question is, well, first, how did you find out? What was your reaction, and what does this recognition mean to you?
Well, first of all, I was like super honored because again, growing up in the industry and my career has really just been in this industry the entire time, is like, that's really kind of been like, I feel like the most honorable mention you can have is being named on that list, because it really shows, the leaders of the industry and people who are, truly what it says, influencers. And I was like just so honored to be part of that, after 20 years of kind of doing this. I found out during IAP, I think someone just texted me, "Hey, congratulations." So I had no idea. I was blown away. As someone who leads business development, IAPA is like the biggest time of the year for me, because we have the greatest opportunity where a bunch of our clients and friends and partners are coming into town. So it's like, how do we make the most of their time here and like make the most of our ability to kind of spend time with them, in a meaningful way. So it was a super duper busy time. You kept a lot of these kind of competing, priorities over the course of that week. So it was, I was kind of like shocked. And I feel like it really wasn't until like after the week kind of settled down, like, oh my gosh, like, I've always wanted that. Like, I actually was able to kind of, to be recognized in that way. And it's not about the recognition. It's about kind of like all of the people who are part of that, right? It's like, to be kind of mentioned alongside of them. And for me, it's really like a testament of, what's possible when you have like really good leaders and mentors along the way, because, I'm just like I was just a regular kid who grew up in Orlando that just wanted to build roller coasters, loved Legos, and played Roller Coaster Tycoon and worked at Revenge of the Mummy. I did my thumbs up, thumb down, kind of just like everybody else over there. And I was lucky enough to kind of like, honestly achieve the dream of so many people. Like, so many people want to be Imagineers and, want to work at Universal and be a part of that. But I've been really blessed and to have really great mentors along the way. And I would always just tell anybody that, sometimes we're lucky and mentors kind of come to us, but like more often than not, you got to go find them. You got to go tell people that you want it, because even people like me, like anytime someone comes to me and asks me like, "Hey, would you be willing to sit down for?" Absolutely. No matter what, like, no, of course, no problem. Like, I would love to help kind of like, if it saves you a year or two in your career by just kind of knowing like where I fumbled or what kind of connections I made and where I found really good value. I always like to share that, which is at Nassal, there's a lot of times we get student groups that want to come in here. I'm like, yes, every time I say yes to all the student groups. Come see what we do, see how we operate, learn a little bit from like the diversity of people that we have working here. And I feel like being a part of, being named on the Blue Loop list there is just kind of a testament of all of those things kind of converging into like, something, it's all right. Something really worked out here for me. And I feel really lucky to be a part of that list, especially this year. Like, some people who I've really looked up to, I've even mentioned some of them during this, or on that list with me this year. I'm just like, holy cow, that's so cool.
It is so cool, and I was so glad to see your name on that list. And congratulations again. I know Josh said it, but I'm going to say it again. It's just it's a great honor, and so glad to see you on that list. But you also mentioned, interacting with the younger generations as they're coming up, and I'm curious, what are some of those pieces of advice that you have for, the future experience creators and the people that may be in your seat one day?
Yeah, I think the cool thing about our industry is that it's so diverse and broad in all of the different ways. Like it's truly an international, industry, which means like every walk of life, every corner of the world, like everyone loves stories and loves to have a good time with their family and friends and escape the real realities of everyday life. And I feel like, as creators, like that's what we're charged with doing is creating those opportunities and spaces for people to have those experiences. And with that means no matter what you're passionate about, what you're skilled at, like whether you're a artist or a plumber or an accountant or a designer, like there's literally a place for everyone in our industry because we need all of those things. So the most important, I think, piece of advice I would give people is just be yourself. It took me a long time to really get to that because, I kind of, growing up, like I was kind of, I think like most kids kind of, you go through that identity crisis of like, who am I and who do I want to present myself as? Which, I guess the older you get, you kind of realize like, I'm just me. Like, and then where I've been able to find the most success and the most rewarding experiences is when I was just really just being myself, and then I've been lucky along the years to kind of see that when I was really myself, like I was given that promotion or I was given the opportunity to be a part of that project team, or I was really able to, as a leader, kind of create a space where people felt like they could be themselves and, we achieved even more together. Like, so really just focusing on being who you are authentically. Don't feel like there's a certain like person you have to be successful in this industry because you really literally need people from all walks of life. You don't have to go to the best schools. You just need to bring in your authentic perspective because you're a consumer of what we build. And whatever skills that you have are applicable for sure in some kind of way. I mean, we deal with everything from robotics to projection to, I don't know, ticket sales, like popcorn making. I mean, all the things, like literally all the things.
Very well said. Appreciate that advice. So we're down to the last couple minutes here, but I do have another question for you. And as far as being able to look at projects that you've been a part of, that you've seen just in design or in a blueprint, or probably some that were started on a napkin scratch, of being able to stand, at the exit and watching guests coming off and just being able to observe it in real time and seeing these just amazing creations come to life. What's that like for you? What are you thinking about? What's going through your mind during those moments?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you asked that because I think it goes back to that that moment that I had being at Revenge of the Mummy, seeing the folks from Universal Creative kind of watch people get off the ride and always saying like, man, I would love to have that moment. And I've been pretty lucky that I've been able to have, a few of those moments throughout my career. But the one that really, really stands out is when I worked at Imagineering and we delivered Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, because it was just like this crazy ambitious thing. And I felt like I was with like the smartest people in the world doing this craziest possible, delivering this crazy, impossible sounding experience that turned out to be so amazing. And being able to be there at 5 a.m. when Galaxy's Edge opened at Hollywood Studios here in Orlando, and watching the crowd rush in, and all of the Imagineers and all these contractors, everyone who took a part in like making this amazing land. It is amazing as it is, but seeing everyone really want to run to the ride that I got to work on, and then standing at the exit with my peers, everyone from the executive producer and creative director to the guy who programmed, the stormtrooper's arm moving, standing at the exit there and seeing people come off just like blown away that we were able to actually pull that off. I mean, I've literally seen grown men cry, telling us thank you for, creating this thing in real life that they've always wanted to experience. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever be able to top like that moment, standing there with people who I looked up to that I was right alongside them. I remember a conversation I had with Scott Trowbridge one time when I was in operations at Universal, actually at Seuss Landing. I knew it was the holidays, like, the hula days. At Scott Trowbridge was there with his family, and I remember seeing him on TV. He was like a celebrity for me. Like, he did the Spider-Man ride and all that. And I remember seeing him on like the Travel Channel or something. And I remember seeing him. I was like, man, one day it'd be so cool, like to work with him. And then we were sitting in the lobby at Hollywood Studios because we were working together on Galaxy's Edge. And I told him about that story, and he was like, Michael, look at that. Like 20 years later, we are working together. Now it's you and me here doing the same thing together. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. I hope that, through the giving back and all this kind of stuff that I do with the industry and education, all that, that someday some kid's going to tell me like, hey, I remember watching you, or I went to your shop that one time, and like, look at us now working on this thing together.
Yeah.
I hope I can have that same moment that I had with Scott for somebody else. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. It's great to sometimes just reflect on those experiences and think, how far we've come or what we've accomplished and things like that. Because I think so often we're in the day to day and we're doing what we do, and we don't sometimes realize how far we've come until we actually take a moment to look at that. So one last sort of attraction related question, and this is more from the consumer side of this of the fence. Do you have a favorite attraction to visit or to experience as a guest, whether you've worked on it or not?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of biased, because I've worked on some of these. I've been lucky. I've been working on some pretty cool stuff. And then being in Orlando, of all places where there's just so many attractions right here. I mean, God, I went to Hollywood Studios the other day for a TA event for the holidays, and I got to go to Rise of the Resistance again. I haven't, you work on these things and you spend like literally thousands of hours on it. It's like, I can count the number of times I've rode Rise of the Resistance as a guest, like on two hands, like not very much. Even though we rode it like hundreds of times as we're trying to like refine it over. But anyway, going there and just seeing the awe that people have, like when you're inside of the ITS and you're getting caught by the First Order, and you just assume you're going to go out the other door, but you go right back out the same door you came in. They're like, holy crap, how did they do that? So I just stand there watching. I just want to see people like, oh my gosh, like turn the other way. Like, how are we possibly going out the same way that we came in? Things like that, or seeing people when we go up the ITS and seeing the AT-ATs there in front of us, like, oh my gosh, we're actually going to another level. Or when the drop happens and they're just like, oh my God, we're dropping too. Like, how do they do all of these different ride systems in this thing? Like, I just love that because it's kind of like a testament of like when you really put the right people together to deliver something that's super duper ambitious. And that always brings me back to the why of it all, is like that experience, like seeing the guests be like, oh my gosh, how did they do that? I can't believe we're doing this. My Star Wars dream came true. That just takes me back to the why. Cause it's like you said, Matt, like we get stuck in the day to day, like, budgets and schedules and like change orders and contracts and like all of this stuff that is necessary part of delivering projects, but really goes back to like that why of that guest experience. So going back there and kind of being reminded of the why is just like the best thing. And one of the things I miss about not working at a park and working somewhere else is not being able to like step in during my lunch break and kind of see guests at play. But I do have the luxury of living in Orlando, and I can go anytime, so
yeah. I just think it's so cool that the question that I asked, as far as you being able to see it kind of from the lens of the designer and seeing the guest, and then you use the same ride in the answer of being able to experience it as a guest yourself. And you described all the things that I experienced, that Matt and I experienced as guests, as consumers. When that same door opened, my head exploded. I was like, what just happened? And then when the lightsaber cut through the wall, and I was like, I don't know how we're gonna get out of this. I was like, we're not even on the ride yet. And then obviously we can geek out for a while on this, but really where I'm getting to here is it really shows that what you do doesn't take away the magic, whether you use magic and Disney's themed kind of IP, or just in general kind of the the secret sauce behind it. Sounds like it really amplifies it, just being a part of it, being so closely connected to it. And then, like you said, that spreadsheets and the budgets and the contracts, and then now seeing it in real life of like, oh right, this is it. This was the vision. This was it coming to life. So, Michael, this was just such a phenomenal interview. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today. If people want to learn more about Nassal, if they want to get a hold of you directly, where would you send them?
Yeah, if people want to learn more about Nassal, they can go to nassal.com. Our website there shows like everything we've done. And then I always open up to people to come talk to me directly. You can reach me on LinkedIn. Look up my name, Michael Acevedo, PMP. I'm available to talk about my personal experience. If you're interested in just getting some advice about your personal experience, or if you're interested in working with Nassal, like in all of the ways, happy to help.
Awesome. Well, like Josh said, this was an amazing conversation. The time just flew right by. So, Michael, thank you again for your time today. We really do appreciate it. And for everybody out there who's watching and listening, just remember, we are all attraction pros.